Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good night, or good morning, wherever you are joining us. I want to thank Sergio. It's really a pleasure to be here in this very important and relevant event. My name is Juan Carlos Luna. I'm the co founder of Lowell Group and managing partner of Logistic. And it's going to be my pleasure to moderate this panel on a very attractive topic about the situation of legal tech in America and Europe. And for that, we have a panel of experts that I would love to introduce. So let me start with Carlos Games. Carlos is now in New York. He's been working at the intersection of product innovation and commercial strategies and operation in the legal tech, legal industry for over the past decade, most recently as Chief Revenue Officer of Frontline Managed Services. Prior to that, as Senior Director of Legal Platform for Thomson Reuters Legal Business. And Carlos frequently speaks at and writes on topics on the legal tech industry. We also thank you, Carlos, for being with us. I'd also like to introduce Tom Martin. Tom is currently in Vancouver. He's CEO and founder of LawDroid, a company dedicated to promoting justice throughout automation, which is a topic we'll expand in this discussion. He's also a practicing lawyer with over 20 years of experience, with degrees from Yale University and UCLA School of Law. Tom is also a co-founder of the American Legal Technology Awards that has been very influential over the past few years. Now in the second year of this event, and they recognize exceptional innovation in 8 categories. Thank you, Tom. And Holder Childs, he's a publisher and event organizer in the legal and business domain, frequently speaks on legal technology and innovation in the legal industry. Holger is co-founder of Moscow Legal Hackers and currently serves as the president of the European Legal Tech Association, a great and very influential association that certainly gives a lot of perspective on legal tech and what's going on in Europe. And he'll tell us about all of that and some exciting and new activities and projects. So, Holger, thank you for being in this panel. He's joining us from Moscow. So, as you know, as you can see, we have a very a broad of experience in this panel. And the idea is really to have a conversation on the situation of legal tech in these two regions, in Americas and in Europe. And for that, I'll ask each of you, probably if you can summarize in a few minutes on how you see legal tech in your countries and in your regions in terms of what are the trends that you see, what are the hot topics happening right now. And with that introduction, after you make your remarks, we'll probably get into more specific issues with each of you. So if you don't mind, Tom, that we start with you to get this insight and flavor of what you see happening, or the most exciting or challenging obstacles, but also the opportunities that you see in this area.
Yeah, thank you, Juan. Um, I think what's really exciting is that it's as if the game is just starting in the legal tech industry and the legal industry more broadly. Up until this point, it's kind of been a cottage industry with you know, legal tech companies working on this problem or that problem, but the stakes weren't extremely high. Now it's become a real business. So you've had companies that have been valued at unicorn status, over $1 billion, including Clio, which is a case management system, and a number of other companies as well, raising for the legal tech sector obscene amounts of money that heretofore were not available. Investors just didn't see it as a priority to be investing in legal technology. But now it's become a priority because it has always been a huge market, but now people are starting to get on board. InCloud Counsel, for example, is a contract automation company, just recently raised $200 million to continue its pursuit of contract automation. Smokeball, which is another practice management company, just recently raised $20 million. These are amounts of money that are coming into innovation within legal tech that weren't previously available, and is also causing a burgeoning market for legal tech startups. There's much more than there were before. Now we're in the thousands, before it used to be hundreds 5-6 years ago. So the stakes have changed. The interest has changed. The money has made the difference. And I think we're at a point where lots of interesting things are happening, more consolidation, and lots of opportunity.
Thank you, Tom. Let me now take it to Holger to get your perspective from the European standpoint.
Yeah, I would like to second that what Tom said. Also in Europe, legal tech is becoming a little more major, not a major, but a little more major business, and people are taking notice outside of the legal industry or the legal tech industry. So you see influx of money from investors who usually do not invest in the legal domain or legal tech startups, and you see the stakes rising. Of course, Europe is not a single place. So there are 44 countries, different in terms of economic development, in terms of size of the legal market, size of the legal tech market. So you have the UK and Germany, number 2 and number 3 in size of legal services market in the world. And then you have smaller countries, especially in Eastern Europe. Nevertheless, you have in almost every country you have legal tech going on, and I'm always surprised you will be structure of elders that we have as so-called foots on the ground ambassadors. We call them ambassadors are people that are the link between ALTA, the head organization, and the local legal tech communities. We have 28 of them. So also in smaller countries, and you see there's legal tech going on everywhere. So that's an interesting issue to look at. What we don't have at the moment, or say from in terms of investment into legal tech, 2021 is also again another stellar year. So the last figure I have is from May this year, and already 660 million euros have been invested in European legal tech startups. Like you have seen it, probably Brighter, German company, or Contractbook from Denmark, and I guess that will continue. I see this year we could probably raise more than 1 billion for European legal tech startups if that trend continues. What we don't have yet is the trend you see in the US with a little bit consolidation on the market. So there's no Litera or no Onit Europe yet, but you see the trend towards some platform. So at every second legal tech conference, you hear the people talking about a legal tech platform, and probably the only way what I see is the only way to get quick to that legal tech platform is by consolidation. I don't see any large player coming up with a solution covering all the legal business processes in a legal department or law firm. So consolidation probably will kick in Europe as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Holger. And that's a great topic. We'll dig deeper into those topics as we advance in this panel. Now I'll take it to Carlos. Carlos, how do you see this developing over the Americas? Basically, you have a great insight into the U.S., but not only the U.S., but also Latin America. And as same as Holger comments, that Latin America is many different countries. So how do you see that kind of playing along the Americas?
Yeah, thank you, Juan Carlos. And I agree with my co-panelists here. I mean, I think the dynamics that they described are spot on. We're definitely seeing both an unusual amount of investment in the space and also consolidation. But I think that what's most interesting to me is the backdrop of that. Like, why are we seeing that, right? And a large part of that, in my opinion, is because of some of the just the trends that were accelerated by COVID. When you look at firms going hybrid, the need for digital transformation, the need for more collaboration with corporate legal departments, legal departments actually being more being stricter about how they utilize their panel firms, how they work with them, how they manage operations. You're looking at not just consolidation, which I completely agree. You're starting to see consolidator companies or portfolio companies getting a large influx from PE firms primarily to essentially integrate and fill out a portfolio of different practices. But what you're also seeing, which is in my mind at least more interesting, is the demystification of legal tech as a vertical. When you look at, why are some of these CLM platforms getting the ridiculous amounts of money they're getting, right? Is because they are the business case that they're making to investors essentially is that they can go beyond legal, right? They're data companies, they are process companies, they are workflow companies. When you look at, there are companies out there like a DocuSign, for example, which is essentially a digital signature tool that, starts proving out the business case, by expanding into different areas. And and these are areas that don't touch just corporate legal departments. They touch the enterprise, and that's what makes legal tech more interesting. And that's what we're starting to see. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. So it's just the space is maturing, and it's consolidating, but at the same time it's also disintermediating, which is really interesting.
Now let me continue with you, Carlos, because there is always the question about return of investment, and specifically for law firms when they start looking at these opportunities or the options to really jump into the digital transformation. What's your perspective on that? How are law firms determine that return of investment in order to break that barrier and really jump into this disruption situation that we're living in every single place?
That's a great question, Juan Carlos, because I think return on investment is being measured very differently at each law firm, and in simplest ways, I mean, the panacea, if you will, is figuring out value. How do you measure value, right? And value is going to have is basically a function of many variables, right? It's going to be, what's going to help me retain talent, what's going to help me land customers, what's going to help me increase payment realization, what's going to help me reduce operating costs, and so far, I don't think at least I haven't seen a law firm that has nailed down the value function. I haven't seen any legal tech provider nail down the value function. Like, what are all the variables that are going to influence and impact value? What I have seen, though, is different flavors of these different KPIs being measured by different law firms, which I think it's an absolute great start. Right. So when you look at, simplest is better. When you look at, for example, e-billing, invoicing tools, the impact that you can measure for law firms is how is the implementation of this system? How is the implementation of or working with this service provider? How is that going to help me increase payment realization and collections? That's very, very simple, right? When you look at on the IT side, you're seeing data breaches and all these things that are responding to cybersecurity questionnaires, complying with corporate legal requirements, and again, you're able to see now that, okay, how is this going to be able? How does this technology is going to enable me to respond faster to an RFP? How is it going to enable me to comply with certain cybersecurity requirements? And I think that's the easy way to calculate value, because you can always peg an acquisition of implementation of legal technology directly to a desired outcome. what I think we're going to start seeing more, given the professionalization of these administrative functions within law firms and corporate legal departments through legal operators, is going to be kind of building out the function of what is valuable to the firm. In some cases, for a firm, for example, and I'll give you just an anecdotal example. There was a firm that did not mind, for example, overpaying on tech support because this was a way, not overpaying in the sense that they were paying more than they should, but overstaffing, because this was a way for them to keep their lawyers happy, right? And keep them, and this is going to be preemptive of what we're seeing now, which is a lot of movement across and lateral hires across different ranks, just because of factors accelerated by COVID, with mobility and just the ability to work from everywhere, and demand for talent. So that higher cost actually is translating into more value, even though it is impacting the bottom line, because it is retaining talent.
Thank you, Carlos. And taking from your last comment about the influence and effect that COVID has had in the legal industry, and Tom, let me turn this to you. We've been almost 2 years on this COVID crisis or situation or the pandemic. How do you see lawyers reacting? Are they more receptive now to the concept and the reality and the benefits of automation? I mean, how has that transformed from pre-COVID to post-COVID realities?
Immensely so. I mean, COVID has basically caused a sea change over the past 2 years. Of course, mostly at the front end of it. There's this author, Stephen Jay Gould, that talks about evolution, and that there's punctuated equilibrium, that things stay the same with a species until there's some stressor. And at that point, things change in the environment and with the species. So like, it's these moments of stress that cause change. And I think that's exactly what's happening here in the legal industry. As Carlos said, one of the factors that's changed, that's been a game changer, is that up until this point, the practice of law has been very traditional. It's been very segmented. It's like these different silos of information that's been kept separately. And even the processes by which you access the information has been, either paper or something that's made it difficult to get into and understand, even, what the data is, because there has been no data to refer to over time with client representation. But now these silos are disappearing, and this information is becoming digitized beyond just PDFs, where you actually can look over years of information and then be able to determine patterns from reviewing this, this information. It's becoming something. That's why there's investment too. It's because it's becoming more intelligible, whereas before it was kind of masked. It was difficult to understand. So, COVID has definitely caused a sea change. I think that there's no going back. People have become too accustomed to the convenience of being able to meet with an attorney by video, or just talking with them on the phone. Even talking with them on the phone, the barriers have come down to virtual representation because people see it as a necessity. And one figure that I saw recently was that prior to COVID, 28% of consumers were open to speaking to a lawyer by video call and having representation that way. And now the figure has gone from that 28% to something like 65%. It's just crazy, and it's not going to change. People like their convenience. And that's the real point, is that consumers are driving this change. And because they've seen that you could do it now, and that they don't have to drive miles to see the attorney and spend money on parking and lose work, lose a work day to visit their attorney, they're not going to do it anymore. So things have definitely changed.
Thank you, Tom. And turning into a topic that certainly we have all seen that in the past couple of years, these legal tech maps appearing in every country, in every region, trying to describe and trying to consolidate who is doing what or what type of segmentation they have. And the immediate reaction to that has to do a lot with the regulatory frameworks. And certainly an area that is being leading on those specific and very challenges issues is Europe. And I know that the European Legal Tech Association is and has been actively engaged in leading and supporting all of those critical challenges and opportunities that obviously have to be very carefully drafted in order not to kill innovation, but really to be able to expand it and support it in the best possible way, while at the same time protecting for all the risk that this new environment creates. So Holger, how do you see that? How can you describe the ongoing efforts on the regulatory side of the equation for legal tech? How is that affecting Europe? And as you mentioned at the beginning, different countries, different cultures,
Yeah,
different economic development. How do you play
exactly.
with all of those elements?
Well, we are looking at that from a standpoint to represent all the stakeholders of the legal tech ecosystem. But in the first place, what Alta is a platform for the users of legal tech. So we are looking what is good for the users of legal tech, and of course, we have to talk to the regulators. The regulation is very different from country to country. So you have heavily regulated countries like Germany. To some extent, the UK is still regulated, although they have been the first with the Legal Services Act in 2007 to open the market to non-lawyer funded and non-lawyer managed law firms and so on. But it is a slow process. But nevertheless, they are doing quite interesting stuff. But Germany is quite heavily regulated. On the other hand, you have countries where you don't have regulation at all, or very few regulation. Well, Russia is one of the countries. So Russia, you can give legal advice without even having a law degree. And until a couple of years ago, you could even represent somebody in court without having a law degree. So that's not possible anymore. But nevertheless, there's quite a very low level of regulation, and it's working. So it's not that the legal service market is breaking down, and you see a lot of legal tech companies, startups being created in Russia without any regulatory problem. They have other problems, but not from the regulator side. But of course, Russia maybe not a poster boy for legal services market or legal tech markets. But if you look at Sweden or Switzerland, they have rather low regulation as well of the legal services market, and it's working. But you see cracks in the armor in Germany as well. So probably the message traveled even to the US market that there has been a very significant law case or decision made in at the highest level, where the Bar Association of Hamburg was suing SmartLaw, a legal tech startup. What they are doing is an online contract drafting tool, offering a contract drafting tool, so everybody can draft a legal document, a contract, or a will, or whatever you want. The main reason for the Bar Association suing with the startup was not that they are offering some kind of legal advice. It's a very hard to define whether an online contract generator is legal advice, but they were advertising as draft contracts as good as a human lawyer. So that was a little bit too much for human lawyers at the Bar Association. But finally they won. So an online contract drafting tool is not considered unlawful legal practice. So that's a huge win for legal tech startups, because they always had to circumvent, they had to use some loopholes in the legal services law. in Germany now. They can operate more freely. I wouldn't say that's now a totally unregulated market, but you see the direction it is going, because everybody's looking at each other. And of course, this is a significant ruling for Germany and also for other countries. So I see the overall trend is to deregulation, a soft deregulation. There will still be in some countries heavily regulated legal services, but legal tech companies probably have more room to breathe.
Thank you, Holder. And because of the importance of that topic, I'll turn it to both Carlos and Tom on their perspective on what they see from the Americas point of view, because obviously there is a lot of communication with what is going on in the European Union in terms of this regulatory framework for artificial intelligence and so forth that impacts pretty much everybody in terms of developing and the startup community and the legal tech advancement and all of that. Tom, how do you see that? And then Carlos, same question for you. How do you see these regulatory efforts, or do you see as obstacle? Do you see it as opportunities or must have? How is this being perceived, and what is happening? And if you can mention some examples in your countries or jurisdiction that paint a good picture of what's going on. If you want, we can start with you, Tom.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So there's been quite a bit of regulatory change for the United States. Utah, Arizona, and I think North Carolina now have regulatory sandboxes. And so a regulatory sandbox is basically where the regulator gives a company a pass. They actually sign a get out of jail free card for that company to be practicing law, essentially. And each jurisdiction has different limitations on how they do that. Here in Canada, in British Columbia, where I'm sitting right now, and also in Ontario, they have the same deal. And Ontario, of course, is the most populated province in Canada. So the way I see it is, if you have a dam and you have a whole bunch of water behind it, and you make some holes in it, it's not a good idea. There's so much volume of water behind it that even though these are little test jurisdictions, what's going to happen, I think, is that there are going to be winners that are produced by these sandboxes. People are going to vote with their wallet. It's the consumer-driven force that's going to make this work and be successful. And once people get a taste of it, and once the regulators see that the world doesn't burn down if private companies provide these services, it's going to open it up amongst all the other jurisdictions, except the ones that are the most stubborn. But that's how I see it. That's how I see what's happening with regulation.
Thank you, Tom.
And I
Carlos,
absolutely love the
from your perspective,
I love the
on a
way
regional scale.
I love how Tom phrased it. I mean, I completely agree with that. The dam with the little hole analogy, because I mean that's essentially what's going to end up happening when you look at. I believe it's is it LegalZoom that now has a law firm associated to it, and you start seeing all these companies consolidating and creating new business models around the cracks that they're authorized to do. And the way I would think about this, not just from the U.S. perspective, but also from Latin America, is from a go-to-market or commercial perspective, you're looking at two different scenarios. Like, one is on the consumer side, there's a huge underrepresentation so in legal services. So 80% of legal needs go unmet in the U.S., right? So it behooves the regulators to allow these cracks and allow kind of the market to operate to satisfy, because I mean there's so much pent up demand for legal services that they're doing society a disfavor by continuing to block the providers of legal services to these sectors. On the larger side, though, what you start seeing is that it starts bending the rules around what is an authorized practice of law, right? And you start seeing ALSPs, or alternative legal service providers, kind of creep in given those permissions, right, and start performing more quasi-legal work as they're doing document review, things that things and this has just historically been the case. We look at e-discovery, predictive coding, all these technologies that were not authorized because they were considered unauthorized practice of law, and eventually become authorized because they're just assisting the practice of law. And so the criteria is set. We're just going to start seeing more and more of these entrepreneurs take advantage of expanding the concept just because there is so much pent up demand. On the Latin American side, I think in particular, it's a huge consumer market. What we're seeing there is, and it's not as heavily regulated, even though it is a fragmented market like Europe, it is not as heavily regulated as it is in the US, where you have these guilds like the ABI or others controlling the practice. So I think they're in a very good spot to start seeing some of these technologies leapfrog. And you already saw, I think there was a ruling. I just was reading it yesterday or 2 days ago, where a blockchain-based conflict resolution provider, Claros, had an arbitration clause. There was an arbitration clause in a contract, in a lease contract, where they would submit any disputes to this a panel of non-lawyers that were arbitrators, that were based on a system. And I'm not going to go into the details how it works, but a Mexican court upheld the judgment that arbitration ruling was enforceable, right? So it is you can see with that the culture in Latin America in general is going to be more lenient towards just getting it done, solving it, for the consumers. And the guilds, professional guilds have less power there to actually do something about that. So if I were to put my money somewhere, it's definitely on the consumer side in terms of just satisfying underrepresentation, right? There's 80% of potential consumers of legal services that are not consuming them because of rules and regulations. And then on the large practitioner side, there's going to be a lot of service delivery model innovation because of these changes in criteria of what constitutes an unauthorized practice of law. So I would just say, as investors or people that want to get into legal tech, there's a lot of opportunity to look in there and see windows, right? And when you think of, a lot of these windows are actually very sound, very scalable businesses because of the pent up demand.
And on that specific topic that you just mentioned, just to go deeper into that analysis, over the past years, and it can be, it hasn't been only the 2 years that we've seen after COVID, but maybe the last 10 years that we've seen that disruption in the legal segment. We hear of the who is eating the law firm's lunch in terms of these new commerce, in these new legal tech enterprises that are jumping into the overall legal industry environment. How does that connect in the specific relationship law firm company? How is the law firm reacting to that? Because obviously, before there were so many of these options or legal tech options, some of that work was being done at some point by the law firms. Maybe not at the highest degree of experience or expertise or tools, and now somebody else is doing that better, faster, cheaper. How is the law firm sector reacting to that when they turn to their clients, to their customers, or to that corporate environment that they need to continue that interaction? How is that type of relationship changed in way of really jumping into this more collaborative reality? And I don't know if we can start with you, Holder, on this, and then I'll ask the same question to you, Carlos and Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I think the fear, if there is any fear at law firms at all, I don't really see it. I see it a little bit in some exaggerated fear towards technology in general, AI being replaced by technology, being replaced by a robo lawyer or robo judge or whatever the fate of the day is. But really, if I look at the latest news that in Germany, the first year associate's salary was lifted up to 140,000 euros, which is quite a high salary in the legal, in the even the German legal service industry. In the US, 231,000 US dollars first year associates salaries. So I don't see any law firm. So for me, that's not an indication that law firms are suffering. Hourly rates are rising, number of lawyers are rising. So I don't see an immediate threat by outside operators. Of course, if you look at the statistics, about 10 to 12 billion legal work have been shifted from law firms to legal departments the last decade, and ASLPs are getting more market share, more and more market share. But the total legal market is growing as well. So I don't see that traditional law firms, are under immediate attack from outside players. Probably law firms will be replaced by law firms with technology, or lawyers will be replaced by lawyers with better technology. That's the general trend. But as Carlos already said, there's and Tom as well, that there's a huge market beyond that 1 trillion bubble. Almost all the traditional law firms are walking in. So if you look at just look at Europe, the consumer portals that propped up about 10 years ago, you had that EU directive that, for instance, airlines have to compensate you for canceling a flight or delaying a flight. That directive, that regulation was in place already before those platforms were started, but nobody was using it because in order to get 250 euros back from the airline, on average, you had to pay 400, 500 euros for a lawyer, because airlines, they didn't just say, okay, yes, we have to, so where to send the check to. So you had to fight in court, and that was economically impossible. It was nonsense. So then those platforms popped up, and they didn't, and no traditional law firm was losing any money, because it was, for them, it was not a viable business. Nobody will spend. On average, for a claim of 50 euros, you have to spend on average 800 euros in Europe, Germany, to fight that claim in court. So that's nonsense, economically speaking. But the platforms, they made it happen. They pushed the costs for those claims down to almost zero, and it became a very profitable business, several billions a year. And no, as I see it, no traditional law firm lost any business. And there's much more business to make just by bringing down the cost, and that is technology, implementing technology. So I don't see it as an immediate threat. The threat is that customers are looking in other directions. So if they see somebody can do it cheaper, because a customer doesn't care who solves the legal problem, they would be happy to have a robo judge. There have been there has been a survey in the UK that 70% voted in favor of having a decision made by a robo judge. And the UK is not a country with the largest delays in getting to a decision in court. If you look at Brazil or India or other countries, people are waiting for years, and they are happy to have a decision made by an algorithm. It's better than no decision at all.
Yeah, how do you see that interaction between the new players in the legal tech environment, the clients or the corporate clients and the law firms? How are they collaborating? Because there is always the question of, maybe a law firm is implementing certain technology, but the client has already a different set of tools that they use in that interaction with, reporting or management of matters or KPIs and so forth. How are they aligned? Are they really ready to be aligned in getting the benefits of this new technology into the legal practice?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because I think I mean, the term I like is kind of frenemies, right? And especially when you look at alternative legal service providers and law firms, they benefit from each other. They understand that kind of there is the risk that they will eat their own lunch, but they all benefit from working together. And I think in terms of corporate legal departments, just thinking about the commercial law, right? Not looking at the consumer space or kind of more traditional justice delivery, right? Just in commercial law, well, the trend we're seeing in general is that, or at least macro level, is that the buy side kind of the corporate legal departments are having more power to determine how they work with their law firms. They are demanding alternative fee arrangements. They are demanding certain conditions through the implementation of e-billing systems, for example. They're not going to pay for photocopies, or they're not going to pay to train an intern at law firm prices. So you start seeing, at least on paper, and the major trend is that they're driving. But the reality is that they're I think the tension between law firms and corporate legal departments is actually building more collaboration, right? Law firms are leaders in the management of certain processes. They are leaders in, they're being hired to perform certain tasks and advice on certain matters because that's what they do. So to say that the corporate legal departments are driving the transformation of law firms, I think is missing part of the picture, right? I think it's a push and pull between both, with none of the actors in the system having kind of full potential to force the implementation of certain technologies upon the other actor. But I think, again, going back to the value conversation, what we are seeing is that with the professionalization of operators, both on the law firm side and the corporate legal department side, and on the alternative legal service provider side, they are talking the same language. You have people collaborating within these three infrastructures, identifying where the value drivers are and aligning on how they're going to get there, and just working out what the right service delivery model is going to look like. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing. So the push is not really going to come from one side or the other. It's going to come from the alignment of these three forces, if you will, to the benefit of the end result, right? So and the end result, to be honest, I mean, that is going to be driven by the client. The client needs certain services performed at a certain quality level. It needs to maintain certain risk profiles. So not every client is going to have the same risk profiles, right? So there is no recipe. I think where things are going to start getting more interesting is, before you had like the Carath model, right? Kind of like the McKinsey model, where you had a hierarchy and you had, like certain rules, and you can always bump up the price per hour, and that's how you make more money and increase profitability at the law firm. I think what we're going to start seeing now, we're already seeing it, is that different law firms are going to start gravitating towards different service models that work for them, right? It's not a one size fits all. If you're a volume provider, let's say you're a labor and employment primarily, driven by volume, you're going to implement certain systems that are not going to be the most attractive for an M&A boutique. So that is, I think we're already seeing it, but the future really is going to be that the ability for firms to be smart about what their own core competencies are, who their clients are, where they want to play, and then build the systems with a combination of technology and allied partners in order to service that client base.
Thank you, Carlos, and we'll now take it to you, Tom, from your angle in these topics.
So I agree with Holger quite a bit in that I don't think law firms are, sweating this. I don't think that when we're talking about AmLaw, 100 large law firms, if anything, what this trend is doing is making them more profitable. They're going to be able to make more money with the time that they have, because they can leverage it more through automation. In terms of like pricing pressure for them, I don't really see them being under any pricing pressure at this point. yes, there are some firms that are turning to automation and alternative legal service providers to help them with some of the work, but I don't really see I don't see big law, worrying too much about this. What I also agree with what was said before was that it's the low level legal work that's being cannibalized. So like the low value stuff, like the airline dispute or traffic tickets, or like all of these small value things that can be aggregated together to make a valuable market. Those are being converted into consumer products. So it's not really like the corporate interests that are being affected. It's more of like the consumer side that's being digitized into, automated legal service. And that's really what's going to change, is that the low value stuff gets converted first, as it always does with new innovation, and then it slowly climbs up the value tree, the value chain. Um, so corporate legal will have to worry eventually, but for right now, there's kind of a sweet spot where they get to take advantage of their historical position and also use automation to benefit their profitability. So that's where I see where things are right now.
And if I
So
can
in
add
a
something to
nutshell,
that, Tom,
sure,
sorry, just wanted to add
go
there.
ahead.
One thing that we haven't spoken about, and I think it's relevant to this automation piece, is that not all corporate legal services are legal services. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more workflow enablement, and it's not going to be driven necessarily by legal tech providers per se, but you're going to start seeing kind of the Salesforce of the world, the ServiceNows of the world, start getting in there and providing some quasi-legal, self-service services to sales teams and procurement teams and all these internal clients of the corporate legal departments. And I think that's where law firms will not be able to do anything about it, because they've never touched that stakeholder base. Right? They always work directly with the corporate legal departments. They build the commercial contracts, and then it's up to the corporate legal departments to determine how they implement and roll out. So I think they're going to start seeing, which law firms are not even thinking about. I mean, they're thinking about alternative legal service providers and all these other things, but a lot of the services that they're providing for their customer base, board of directors advice, that's there's going to be other avenues for that, and it's not going to come from law firms. It's not going to come from legal tech. It's not going to come from the big four. It's going to come from their blind spot, or adjacent technologies that are very relevant to that particular niche application or service.
Which in this point is very relevant to mention that the legal industry by itself, based on the comments that you've made, is no longer exclusive of lawyers as we know it, because of these new models, these new players, these new other professionals that are jumping into the legal industry, providing some segments of different type of support and proficiencies that maybe they were lacking, or maybe there is somebody else better prepared or equipped with different tools to make it happen. So in a way, that's one of the main topics that I heard it from also a European event, that they say, guys, keep in mind, I mean, the legal industry cannot be or continue to be exclusively for lawyers. And obviously that has a lot of context on the issues that we talked about, the bar associations and the practice of law and so forth. But the delivery of those legal services, and as Tom was mentioned, the automation and the collaboration brings together a lot of new ideas, models that are going to be part of the puzzle. So we have a few more minutes, and I don't want to end this panel with touching on a very important topic, which is the education to this new generation, or to the education of the legal segment and the legal tech, or bringing legal tech into education, because that's from my perspective and all the trends that we've seen, the consolidation of these changes will happen once this generational transition into the new lawyers and the new lawyers mindset and the digital lawyers and these new models of different players really come to realize that this is at the very first step of this formation of the new lawyer skill set. So for that, and I would like to start with you, Holder, because I know that ELTA has been very active on these topics. How do you see this, the transformation of, let's say, legal education and legal tech? And I'll ask the same for you, kind of almost closing remarks to Tom and Carlos, and then we'll probably have a minute to close the panel. But please go ahead, Hol.
Yeah, yeah, sure. What I think that if you want to speed up implementation of legal technology in legal departments and law firms, then we have to start with legal education. So to make, so to say, to make law students into agents of change, because the moment former law students enters the workforce, they are subjected to the old way of doing business in the legal industry. They don't have time. They have to make billable hours, and it's hard to implement some ideas if you're the first year associate. But if they are working with legal technology, and most of what I've seen in different countries in law school, most of the students, they don't even have a clue what legal technology is. First, always, if you speak before students, first question is, have you ever heard about legal tech? And quite a lot never heard about it. It's changing, but it's changing slowly. So there should be some concerted effort of all stakeholders, not only legal tech vendors, not only associations, but all regulators, law schools, students themselves should demand it in most of the countries in some way or form, either via taxes or directly pay for the education. So they are the customer of the education. They can demand to have legal technology or all the new skill sets. Legal innovation in a broader sense has to be included into legal education. Otherwise, we will continue to push out students which are perfect lawyers. They have all the legal knowledge they ever might need in their career, but they don't know how to use a matter management system or practice management system. They draft every contract from scratch and so on and so on, so that they are working not efficient enough. And if they come into a law firm probably in a perfect world, they would say, okay, guys, I cannot work like that. And you see it already. If you look at the legal research databases like LexisNexis, Westlaw, they are doing that already for years, for tens of years, introducing law students to their databases. And there's practically, I would say, in the English-speaking areas, there are no law students that don't know how to use at least one of those legal research databases. And you probably couldn't get employed in an AmLaw 100 law firm if you didn't know how to use LexisNexis or Westlaw. It's impossible. And that should be the same with legal technology. So if you're going to work in a law firm and you don't know what's a practice management system or knowledge management system, never worked with that, you should become unemployable. And then you can change, you can affect change, because you are still dynamic. You are not impacted at the old way of doing business in the legal industry. So that's our hope, and we will launch an initiative together with the European Law Student Association to bring legal technology in a concerted action to bring legal technology into law schools and help them to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And the same, maybe in a minute or so, Tom, how do you see that? I mean, how big of an issue is that, and what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so I think there's a big, difference between law students that want to go work for big law or law students that want to go into people law. So like consumer services. So the ones going into big law, they don't really care that much about legal technology because they're going to get paid on the hours that they put in, day out. So it might help them or not. But the ones that are going into people law will have a much more direct interaction with technology. And I have to say that this isn't something new. Like, this isn't just happening now. Students have been taking their experience with consumer services. Like, they deal with companies all day long that use chatbots and different types of automation, and this is part of their DNA. So like, for them to bring their life experience and map it onto the legal services they're providing is something that they're just going to do. You know, it's older attorneys that maybe are used to providing it in a traditional way that don't see, meeting the consumers where they are as easily. But I think that the students that have already graduated, the ones that are graduating, they see that connection, they see that opportunity, and they're going to take advantage of it.
Excellent. Carlos, a closing remark on this topic?
Yeah, yeah. I have mixed feelings about this. I'm a adjunct professor at a legal tech master's degree, and taught digital contracts, but when you look at like my classmates from law school, with traditional legal education, I mean, some of them they're political operators, they're general counsel, they're investment bankers, they're doing a bunch of different things, right? And I'm in business, right? I'm not even practicing law anymore. And I think one of the things that law school has traditionally taught that I think won't ever go away is critical thinking, and lawyers are critical thinkers by nature. So I think the change that I would want to see in law schools it's not really changed because I've already seen it. It's more clinics, more practical expertise, more. But at the end of the day, you can't, and that's just my view. You can't teach law students about kind of legal tech and tools that are out there that are going to be obsolete maybe as soon as they graduate, or they're going to go bankrupt as soon as they graduate. I think what you need to be teaching law students is that there are multiple ways to solve for client needs, and I am seeing a lot of this kind of in terms of implementing design thinking, critical thinking, empathy tools, business, just critical management skills, critical technology skills. I think the saying that we all learn how to use Westlaw in law school and Lexis. I mean, those are things that are just so ubiquitous that are going to be there when you graduate, and you need to know how to use. I don't think there's that many ubiquitous tools out there that law schools should be teaching to students.
Not yet.
But
not yet.
Not yet. If there are, they should, by all means, right, be teaching them. But, in terms of supporting what they need to learn, but they need to provide the opportunities for law students to be able to discover these tools on their own. That is, through clinics and through, cross school activities and that sort of thing.
Excellent. And that's why events like this one are so relevant, and they should continue to expand their influence, the reach in every country, in every region, in order to be able to share that and communicate what's going on in the legal tech associations, in the bar associations, what's going on with the chief legal officers, what are the trends that they are kind of leading, because the legal industry is being changed, and maybe not by lawyers. That's something that we need to understand. And with that, Holger, Carlos, Tom, we reached the top of the hour. It's been a great conversation. Great honor to have you on this Global Legal Tech Hub Day. We're honored to have been invited to this event and be able to put this very talented panel. So again, thank you very much. And let's continue to do that critical thinking and to innovate in the legal industry. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Thank you, Juan Carlos.